up, you phonies? How's it going? Welcome to another Blender tutorial. In today's video we're gonna use the effect we did last time where something creepy crawls out of the wall, and now in this video we're gonna try to do the same effect in a real scene. Live action scene I shot downstairs in my living room where Ellie, the actress, is sitting on the couch minding her own business, and eventually something creepy is coming out of the wall. How can we do this? I'm gonna show you right now. We are doing this effect in Blender. This is what my Blender scene looks like when I start. I have a camera and Michal. We're gonna keep Michal for scale references, but we are not gonna need him for the actual effect. Also, I'm gonna keep the camera for now. So the first thing we need is our footage. If you don't have any footage, just use your camera, put it on a tripod, shoot against the wall. Once you have your footage, go to your camera, click on it, then go to your camera settings, add image, make it a movie clip if it's a movie, and open, find the video you recorded, minus right here. So we can see I can use my video as a camera background, which is a great start. So now we need to align the camera position, rotation with our actual video, and there's great software out there where you can use F-Spy, for example, or perspective plotter. This is what it looks like. I can plot my perspective, have my guidelines. This is my y-axis, for example, and I try to align the lines in my shot with the actual camera, basically just aligning the perspective, and that way I know exactly the focal length of my camera and other settings like the perspective, and that is awesome to have. But if you don't have perspective plotter or you don't want to deal with it and you just have a tripod shot, you can eyeball it too. So let's try that instead. I'm making a new camera. On the top view I'm looking through my camera, and again I'm adding the background image just like before. Make sure a movie clip is selected, open, and now this is my shot. It's always smart to remember a few things, like for example the focal length on the camera. I used 28 millimeters. That's definitely good to know. Then I also measured the distance from camera to ground, which was exactly 1 meter. So under the camera settings, under item, under the Z location, it's exactly 1 meter. Now I also measured the distance from camera to wall. Let's make our wall first. Just Shift A, making a plane. I rotated 90 degrees. Now this is going to be my wall. And you can see already the wall is not where it's supposed to, and that's fine for now. But let's work on our camera location first. So this here is my Y location. And I measured the distance to the wall, and it was around about 4.5 meters, 4.5. So now this is the distance to the wall. Everything on the x-axis here is my wall. Now the one thing I don't know is how far the camera was on the left towards the x-axis. I don't know that, so I have to eyeball it. Doesn't really matter. But now that this distance is fine, now I can work with my rotation, with my X rotation, rotate it until the wall touches the ground, which is more or less here. It would be helpful if I could actually see the ground, but I can't. But it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, just more or less. Now that is my wall. Now I'm going to scale my wall exactly where I want my effect to be, because the idea is that I have my actress here sitting on the couch with her little puppy, Kira, and I want this effect to appear right here. So now I'm going to move my wall exactly in between here and scale it around about the size that both picture frames are going to be in it. Let's say this size. That's what I need. I'm going to scrub forward, remove my plane. I can see that my little Michal here, he's standing inside the wall right now. Let's bring him a little closer. So now he would be standing right in front of the couch, and size-wise, it's close enough. So for now, we don't need Michal anymore. Let's bring our plane back. Okay, now the idea is something creepy comes out of the wall. Let me check real quick which frame. Okay, here she starts to hear something. So let's say on frame 90 is where the actual action is going to start. And that's just for us to remember. Okay, so for the actual effect, what we need, we're going to need a simulation effect called dynamic paint. And for this dynamic paint effect, we need two different objects. We need a canvas, the wall is going to be our canvas, and we need a brush. And for a brush, I downloaded a very cool model. This model, that's what we're going to use. I borrowed this from egorova.e. Thank you very much for letting me borrow this real quick. And I just downloaded it as a FBX, and now I can just import it into my Blender sequence. I go on File, Import FBX, and now this and this are my FBX files. I go on Source, and that's what I want. Great. Unfortunately, the textures don't work right now, but that doesn't really matter because I'm not going to need any textures, because I'm going to put a texture on this wall, which is going to be a very cool effect later. Because this video here, I'm going to use this video, I'm going to UV project this video onto this plane, so it's going to be seamless. So all the effects I'm going to do to this plane are going to be visible with all the textures of the actual wall. You're going to see in the end what I mean by that, but that's going to be pretty sick. Anyways, let's go back to our skull. The skull, what I wanted to do is poking through my plane here. Of course, right now it's way too big, so I'm just going to scale it down until it has the size I want. Turn on off the plane so I kind of see the perfect position and the perfect scale. Great. Once I adjusted the position and the scale, and I think I'm happy with it, let's make it a little tiny bit bigger. I'm going to apply the scale with Control A, apply the scale. Now if I wanted to, I could adjust the model a little more. Like for example, I want his forehead to have a little pokey thing out. So I'm just going to use a UV sphere, bring it right to his forehead. Let's scale it. So I just scale it down until I have something I can set into his forehead like this. And now I'm just going to bring it right here, because it's going to look better if we have like a bone sticking out right above the eyes like that. Cool. I go back from edit mode, back to object mode. Actually, I'm going to adjust those little horns here with proportional editing. Bring those horns a little more to the front. Okay, that should do. Does it look perfect? No, but it doesn't have to, because it's all going to be a silhouette anyways once we're done with it. Now, I told you we need a canvas and a brush. Our skull here is going to be the brush. Our plane is going to be the canvas. Make sure to apply the scale if you change it. Now, we're going to go down here on our physics properties, and we're going to use dynamic paint on our plane. Canvas is selected, add canvas. Okay, that's good for now. Under surface type, we're going to use waves. It's really up to you if you're going to use waves or displace, but from my understanding, waves is the better way to go here. Now, we're going to go on our skull, also add a dynamic paint. The type is not going to be a canvas, it's going to be a brush. Add brush. We don't really have to adjust anything here. Now we're going to go back to our canvas, and we need to select a few things. If we just play it as is, because our guy is not moving right now, nothing is going to happen for multiple reasons. What we need is lots of subdivisions on our wall, and the way we're going to do that, we're going to do it two ways. We're going to go and tab in edit mode, right click, and subdivide. You see those squares here? Now we just need way more of those. Let's say 50. Now we have lots of subdivisions. But also what we're going to do is, let's go back to object mode. The other thing we're going to do is go to our modifiers and add modifier and use subdivision surface. Click on simple, change those two numbers to 3 or more, and move this on top of your dynamic paint. That already, see, now we have all those subdivisions here which can make our effect. Pretty cool, right? That's obviously not the effect we want, but for now what we're going to do is animate our skull here. We remember on frame 90 is when our skull enters the shot. So right now we're going to move him on the y-axis away from our wall here. Maybe also a little to the top. Let's actually adjust the scale a little that it's gonna reach the top wall or the ceiling. Okay, apply the scale because we changed it. Now on frame 87, let's say, we're gonna start animating our skull. We're gonna animate the location and the rotation. So I'm gonna go a few frames to the front, and now I'm just gonna grab the Y location, bring it into our wall. It's really up to you how far, how deep you want to go. And then under here, I hover over my graph editor, hit I, and just only selected channels, which was all of them. Click only on my Y location and hit hover over the graph editor, hit I, only selected channels, so I only animated my Y location, let's say to here. I'm just gonna go through my timeline and animate my entire thing until I'm satisfied. So now I have a whole animation of my skull going through, just to have a little movement, and as long as it's creepy. Great. The idea is we're gonna turn our skull off, so all we're gonna see for now is just the waves, which that alone would already be pretty creepy. So imagine instead of those edges here, we're actually just going to see the walls and only those ripples here. That alone would be very scary. So, but that's not what we're doing here. What we are actually doing is we're going to project from our camera the actual video onto our plane. I'm going to show you how to do it now. We go in our modifiers, add modifier, and UV project. On the UV project, we're going to select object, and it's going to be our camera. Under the aspect ratio, we have to type in the aspect ratio of our actual video, which is full HD. So I'm just going to type in 1920 by 1080. And now if we add material, I'm just going to give it a new material, delete the principal BSDF. What we need is an image texture, and we open our actual video, which is right here. If we connect this with our output, we see we have our actual video projected on our wall. Right now it's just purely emissive, so we can have a diffuse texture in between, and with the RGB curves node we can adjust the colors until they look similar to what they were before. But that's also not super important since we can adjust those things in post. Okay. Now we have our ripple effect, which is pretty cool, but not quite what we're looking for here. So let's go to our plane and adjust those settings a little. Under physics properties, we can open or close our borders. When we close them, when we open them, we can see it doesn't go over the edge, but we can also close it, then it's also going to go over the edge. So depending on what you want, in my case, I want it. Now with the time scale here, you can adjust how fast it's going. See, now it's going faster. When I go down with it, the ripples are way slower, super slow, and that's almost what we want here. So now we're just going to find a happy medium of what number we want, and let's just try and error. Just try it out until you have a version you like, but that's pretty cool already. Yeah, that's basically the effect I want already. And let's go with speed up so we can see what it does. Let's just fasten that a little. Speed down, see what that does. Yeah, very similar effect. Now you can also increase the damping. Let's do 0.5 and you're going to see what that does. It just keeps the shape a little better of what it is we're trying to do here, which is pretty cool. Let's go very high, 0.999. So it's almost 1 but not fully. So that way it just stays there. But that's not actually what we want, but it is very close. So let's keep this number high, but not too high. Let's see what spring does. To me, it's just important that we always going to be able to see, oh, it's actually a skull which is coming out. So spring is not what we want here. If we just want to decrease the influence, we can do this too. In my case, I don't want to do this. We can decrease the radius, so it's not going as far, which in our case, it doesn't really matter because we don't work with those ripples. We just want this effect right here. So you can just keep those numbers on 1. You can increase the smoothness, which is going to just make it, as the name says, a little smoother. In which Y location is it in this exact moment? Because I want it to come back exactly here. So I'm just going to copy this Y location number and go to my later frame where I have another keyframe, which is right here. Paste this number and hover over the graph editor, hit I only, select the channel. So it's basically coming back to where it was here. And even later I have another keyframe on the Y location. I'm also gonna copy paste the same number right there. And once you're happy with the way it looks, you can just copy paste my numbers if you want the exact same result, but you really should play around with these settings so you really know what it does and how it works, because that's the only way you can learn. But anyways, once you're happy, go to your frame start and end frame and figure out how long your video actually is. And my video ends on frame 367. So on 367, this is how long I want my simulation to be. And now, once I adjusted those numbers, I go to cache and make sure to save before and bake. Now you see my computer rendering and baking the simulation to what I want it to be. Depending on your computer, it can take very long or very short. In my case, it's not too bad. It takes around, I would say, 30 seconds. So now my simulation actually goes until the very end. And now I also have to adjust the length of my whole simulation, my whole animation. So on 367, that's my last frame. So I want it to go to 367. But the problem is, if I render it now, this is what it would look like. Way too dark, it doesn't look right, and that is because I don't have any lights yet, so I have to adjust that now. So the first thing I do is I go to my world settings and I see I have a background, like gray background. I'm going to delete it. So now it's just pitch black because I'm going to set my own lights. When I look at my scene, I have a big window front on the left, and I also have one on the right off camera, so I'm just going to simulate that. So I'm going to shift A, light, and it's going to be an area light. I'm going to rotate my area light towards my scene 90 degrees. I'm going to bring it up here where it has to be, more or less in the right position. And again, it's a pretty big light, pretty big windows. I'm just going to scale it up until it has the same size. Let's switch to cycles so we can actually see what it looks like. And now I'm going to go to my light settings and turn it up, because what I actually want is that the shadows here will look just like my real shadows here. And for that, I actually recorded a reference video, which is very important to do. Let's look at this. This is my Premiere file. So I made poor Allie, look at her. I made her lean against the wall so I see what those shadows actually look like. Let's put a LUT on it so we can actually see what it's actually going to look like, and like this. Okay, I have a big soft shadow on from the light source on the left, and I don't have any shadows on the other side. So all I need is just a fill light from this, so my shadows in my scene are not going to be as dark. So I'm just going to duplicate my area light, bring it to the other side, rotate it 180 degrees. Now I'm just going to bring it far away enough that it just gives me the results I need. Now with the lights, we can see we actually could use a little more smoothness on our simulation. So don't feel bad if you have to go back and rebake it. That happens all the time. So I delete the bake, increase the smoothness, let's say 1, and bake it again. And that looks a lot better. Now I'm going to take a closer look at my shadows. If they're just as soft as my reference shadows, and if they're not, then I can just make my area light bigger. That's going to soften up the shadows. Now if you want to keep your skull in it, but not obviously in a shape like this, we can give it a new material, delete the principled BSDF, give it a volume scatter, plug this into volume, and now just haze is going to come out of the wall, just like a ghost or something. If that's something you want, you can try that. And for that, this number has to be 0.6. And even the density, you can animate that with a noise texture. Plug this into the density. Let's see what it looks like. This is the scale roughness. Let's make it a little rougher detail. Let's make it less detailed. Add a little distortion. And now if we switch this to 4D instead of 3D, we can go to the very first frame and animate the W value. So it's going to be moving a little. If we want this effect a little stronger, plug in a color ramp right in between and increase the contrast. Now let's remove that from the surface. And now it's just going to be haze. Just in case you want it, I don't, so I'm going to remove it. So make sure when you render this, you want to turn off the skull completely. You can keep this one on, but from the render and from the viewport, you don't want to see this. Very important. Otherwise, you're just going to have the skull in there just like that. And you don't want this. The only thing you want to see is the effect on the wall. And once you're ready to render, you need to set up a few things in your compositing layout. Make sure you render an image so you kind of see what it looks like. So what we're going to need is a file output node. Just in case, I'm also going to render a shadow catcher separately. So my image goes into image. Under the file output node, I'm going to add another property, another input. Call this shadow, and shadow catcher goes into shadow. If I want to see what the shadow catcher does, plug this into shadow catcher, but really that's all I need. Under file output, make a new path where you want to render it to. Mine is right here, render, that's where I want it. Make sure the color depth is 16. Make sure to render in RGBA, where in this case it's not super important, but it's better than not. And if you believe you're ready, go on render and render animation. And then the next step is to composite that in After Effects. So see you in a few hours when this is done. And a few years later, the render is finished. Let's keep going in After Effects, because now we have to composite all this effect into our real footage so it looks good. So this is my After Effects. The first thing I do is I open up my actual video. This is my video, and I'm just gonna drag and drop it into the new composition. Amazing. Now I'm gonna double click again to import my renderer. So I'm just gonna go to my image. This is my image. You can select any one of those. Make sure PNG sequence is selected and hit import. Now one more time, and now this time I'm gonna go with my shadow, because I'm not really sure if the shadow is going to do anything, but let's just check it out. Now, before you drag and drop it into your timeline, you need to make sure that your frame rate is the same. So click on your video, now interpret footage, copy this number here, now go on your image, interpret footage, paste this number, set OK, and also on your shadow, interpret footage, and paste this number, set OK. Now we're just going to check out our shadow first, because I'm very curious if the shadow does anything, and nope, it doesn't, so we don't need our shadow. Now we use our image, drag and drop it in our timeline. Now this is our effect here. If we remove the image, we see our video, so now we have to composite it together. So I'm just going to go to the frame where I see most of my effect, which is down here, and now I'm going to draw a mask around this. So just with my pen tool here, I'm going to draw a mask right about here. Now you can see our video or our image here and the wall, they don't look the same anymore because the lighting was a little different and it's not perfectly adjusted. So now we're going to use a few effects to try to get this one looking like this wall here. So right click on your image, effect, and let's start with color correction and lumetri color. If we just increase the exposure, we're gonna get already closer. So I'm just gonna go here as close as possible so I can see this edge here. I can even remove my mask. I try to remove this edge. So I try to get as close as possible. That's not bad. Now the tint is a little off. It has to be a little bluer. So I'm gonna play with this until I don't see this edge anymore, or at least as close as possible. That's not bad. Now we can just hit, with your image selected, hit F and feather the mask a little until those ugly edges disappear. But not too much, just a little. We can even bring our mask a little closer to it, so let's just see, that is fine. We can also see that our foreground person here, Allie, she's like covering up the effect, so we need to rotoscope her eventually. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. Also, we can see from our previous image, we can see the heads poking out a little, so we're just going to move the mask until we don't see that anymore. That already doesn't look too bad. It's pretty cool. Yeah, since it's so feathered, we probably don't even need to rotoscope her. I'm still gonna do it, so in case you have a person right in front of your effect, it's gonna make it easier, or you have more flexibility to cut people out and whatnot. So I'm gonna show you how to do that right now. So go on your actual video, hit Control D, so you duplicate it, bring this to the top. Now your effect disappears, which is fine, because now I'm gonna use the rotor brush tool on my actress here. So I'm gonna double click it. This is my rotor brush tool. With Alt and Control selected, you can shrink your brush a little if it's needed, because now I can just rotoscope her out as detailed as possible. I don't need the whole body, just enough of your upper body and head, so nothing is gonna interfere with our effect, and it's gonna look fine. We might have to rotoscope our puppy here too, but we will see in a second. You can zoom in to get a little more detailed work done here, just as close as you can. Again, with Alt, Control, and left click, I can shrink my mask. With Alt, you can negative draw. Without Alt, you positive draw. So let's say by accident I draw too much. With Alt, I can remove this again. If you think you have done a pretty decent job, you can just play your video, and After Effects is going to do the rest. See, it's just very short. Let's just keep going just in case we need more, but probably not, because she's staying on the ground. So we really don't need this effect anymore, which is great. Well, we need to go definitely negative because she's blocking the effect here. So I'm just gonna go backwards with Control left arrow. I can go backwards, and I'm just double checking if the mask still looks fine. That should do, because here we don't need it anymore. Great, now when we watch it, it's going to be a little slower in your performance, but it looks fine. Good, here we don't need this effect anymore, so I'm just going to delete it here. We don't need this effect here either. So with Control Shift D, I can make a cut and delete the part before. So it's really just a few frames where we really need it. Like right here. Nice. Okay, to my effect in general, like when I look at a little closer, things I haven't seen in Blender before, it's like it looks a little rippled. So, and it's also, I didn't use any depth of field. The focus was on Allie here while she was sitting. The wall is slightly behind her. So what I can do is just put a little blur effect on the Blender effect in the background. So I just right click, blur and sharpen, Gaussian blur, and just set it to something what looks still realistic. So don't go too crazy here, especially if your effect is like right behind your subject. Yeah, the reason why I framed it this way, by the way, is because for YouTube Reels, for example, or Reels in general, you're gonna have an aspect ratio of 9:16, so it's gonna be like vertical. So I wanted it to be like, you know, we can see the effect and the actress at the same time, because sometimes I shoot myself in the foot, I can't find the right thumbnail or, you know, the right framing. But here I didn't want to use any camera motion because I wanted to make it look like it's shot secretly, so there is no camera man behind the camera. So that's why I have my actress and my effect basically in the same frame. And now you can just make a new adjustment layer, hit on layer, new adjustment layer, put this one on top, right click, effect, color correction, lumen true color, and now we can just give it some extra color correction to make it look like the way you want it to look like. For social media videos, it's always good to have your videos very bright, so just keep that in mind, even though it's not super cinematic, but you know, just looks better for social media. So I always increase the exposure a little, you know, bring down the shadows, bring up the whites a little, bring down the blacks. Just adjustments like that make visual effects always look a little more realistic, because it brings like your CG footage and your real footage closer together. Sweet. You can go to creative, adjust the sharpness a little, make it a little sharper, a little more vibrance. And once you're happy, go to composition, pre-render, save, and then I have my own template, the way I render my things, but it's really up to you. I use high quality, I use Apple ProRes 422 usually. If I need an alpha channel, then it's ProRes 444, and under RGB, I'm gonna use RGB and alpha instead. But in that case, I don't have any alpha, no transparency, so I just use that. Then hit render, and that's the result. So I hope you guys liked this effect. I hope it all made sense the way I explained it. Obviously there's many ways to use this effect to make it better or different and put it in different scenarios. That's just one example, and I'm very excited to use this effect for like a short film or a feature film, and that's gonna be super cool. If you haven't checked out part 1 to this video yet, make sure to do that. You're gonna see it in a second in the end card, and thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video. Toodaloo.